Hey there, Redwood A Push. Mr. Eskridge and Mr. Vera here to cover Chapter 10 in American Yop, Religion and Reform. And so we're going to do this pretty quickly, so just kind of bear with us, buckle in as we go through. Okay, so the chapter really focuses on as the United States is growing, as the population is increasing, as the government is expanding, as new states are coming into the Union, as the economy is booming in the North, the economy is booming in the South. There's a greater increase in slavery, there's a greater increase in um, urban populations, just everything is growing during this time as we've been looking at. And so really what really encapsulates this chapter and during this time period is that people start to get a little apprehensive about all of this growth, and they start to question what are the good aspects of this and what are maybe some harmful things. And so that we're just going to cover these social movements during this time. Okay, so the first one that we're going to talk about is the Second Great Awakening. So if you remember back to the First Great Awakening, happened prior to the American Revolution, and it happened basically for similar reasons of the Second Great Awakening. So people started to look at society as it was growing and just started to come up with these ideas that society, American society, had started to move away from the foundational ideals on which it was founded. I.e., Christianity was the major religious aspect of that, and so people started to, question the degree to which Americans had gone away from that. And so, similar to the First Great Awakening, we start to see religious revivals really spread through the United States. We're seeing them again in rural regions, in greater numbers than in urban regions. We have them in the north and the south and the west, and we start to have a lot of people being converted. A lot of people are listening to what preachers are saying. Preachers are also able to kind of come up with their own interpretations of the Bible after leaving the ties with the Christian or the Church of England, after the Revolution. And so we're starting to see this more egalitarian kind of self-individual form of religion, individualistic. And that's really important because that goes along with these ideas of democracy and self-governance and all these different aspects that we're seeing right now. So when people are starting to come together around prison reform, church reform, temperance, which is abolition of alcohol, and women's rights, and then also abolitionist or abolishing the institution of slavery. So we're seeing a lot of denominations, and just American religion is really growing at this time, really questioning the old standard ways. So here's just a picture of one of those camp revivals in which people just get really enthusiastic. These preachers are really enthusiastic, yelling, giving these really powerful sermons, and people are just reacting to those in various ways. And it's a get-together in that aspect as well. Okay, so kind of just at age of reform, so we're going to look at just a couple different significant figures within this. Typo. So, yeah, don't mind the typo. We don't grade you on your spelling either. So people start to look at various aspects of society, one of which is criminal punishment. And you may remember from the Enlightenment with Beccaria and talking about no cruel and unusual punishments. People are looking at the United States and, what is being criminalized? What is being looked at as being unacceptable? And how are people being imprisoned? Are they being imprisoned and just locked up and not given opportunities? And so we start to see reform where people start to question, especially a woman by Dorothea Dix. She starts to question whether or not people with mental illness are being just unfairly imprisoned, or if there's adequate things that are being done to help them overcome some of the mental issues that they're dealing with, and many of which may be caused by society or what they're dealing with. We're seeing a lot of middle-class women involved in all of these different activities that we're going to be talking about. So really, as we've talked about before, they're lacking political voice. They don't have the ability to vote. They don't have the ability to really participate in politics. So we're seeing women become extremely active in a lot of these social reform movements. So it gives women a platform in which to participate in this American system and this American project. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Vieira. He's going to continue.
All right, so as Mr. Eskridge was just saying, middle-class women were playing a huge role, a more active role in politics and in society as a result of the Second Great Awakening, and that really comes through in the Temperance Crusade. Again, temperance is the abolition of alcohol, or the push to abolish alcohol in the United States. One of the key reasons why alcoholism had become such a huge problem in America in the 1820s and 30s is that whiskey was relatively cheap to make, and so because it was cheap to make, it was cheap to purchase, and in a lot of cases, the alcohol, especially stronger alcohols, were safer than drinking water because there was so much issues with drinking water in early American society. So it's a huge cause of crime and poverty and disorder in American society. And so you begin to see groups, especially groups led by women and led by different churches that were created as a result of the Second Great Awakening, really try and tackle this problem. And to a large degree, the Temperance Crusade is successful. The amount of Americans that are drinking, or the amount of Americans that are being reported for drinking problems such as alcoholism, is cut in half over a 20-year period, which is a success, and that helps to lessen crime, lessen some of the social evils that were created as a result of this easy access to alcohol. And you begin to see the Temperance Crusade take on a real political, legal battle too, in that several states and a significant amount of counties, especially in the South, like Lynchburg, Tennessee, which is home to the Jack Daniel's distillery, become dry counties in which it is illegal to sell alcohol. And so the Temperance Crusade is just one real good specific example of social reform in practice. And the players in the Temperance Crusade, women, churches, were really the driving force behind a lot of the social progress that you see during the 1820s, 30s, and into the 40s as we get closer and closer to the Civil War during this antebellum period. So I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Eskridge. But before I do, here's kind of just one example of one of the pamphlets that were produced, work of art, whatever, to sort of show the issue of alcoholism in America. You have these figures, male figures, who are going through their party stage, and all the while getting closer and closer to desperation and crime, while the family unit at home is struggling, seen here as the woman and child being left alone at home. So I'm going to turn it back over to Eskridge, and I'll be back in a minute to wrap this up.
All right, hey guys. Okay, so another piece of social reform that we're going to talk about, and one that's extremely important, and we've seen little pieces of this, tidbits of this throughout the course so far, is the abolition. And when we say abolition, and I know that I said it earlier, and so did Ms. Rivera, about the abolition of alcohol, abolition, as we will kind of commonly talk about it, is more referring to the freeing of enslaved persons. So that's really what we're going to focus on here. So abolition, again, we see this movement start to grow during this time as people are questioning, American society, questioning the institutions in which the society is built, our country was built. And slavery obviously is a glaring issue, as we've really hit on, I feel like, in this past unit. And so the abolition movement really starts to grow during the 1830s, and it's really spearheaded by free black or escaped black persons, such as Frederick Douglass and others, and also middle-class white Americans, many of which were part of the Second Great Awakening, and they started to call out, the biblical principles that Southerners used to uphold the institution of slavery, and they just said that is contradictory. And so they found that it was part of their goal under their religion to make sure that everyone has freedom. And so we start to see many abolition organizations start to grow in really significant numbers. We're starting to see anti-slavery publications start to spread as well. Probably one of the most significant one that we'll talk about here is The Liberator by William Lloyd Garrison, who's a part of the Second Great Awakening, very influential abolitionist. And what he does is he really starts to print material that's speaking out against slavery. And so there's some backlash to that. People in the North aren't all opposed to slavery. Many of them think that it's wrong, but their moral arguments are kind of overridden by these strict social and racial structures that describe and define American society at this time. So we start to see mob attacks. We have poor middle-class whites that attack these abolitionist movements. And so this is kind of just an interesting kind of little time. And one thing that the abolition movement kind of starts to fracture over is whether the movement should really focus on giving women's rights or just focus on slavery. And so that's going to continue to be an issue. And as we'll see, the issue of women's rights is going to be pushed to the wayside as we move closer to the Civil War. So here's just a picture of one of the covers of The Liberator, and just kind of goes back to the print culture of the United States. The media continues to be a really big source of political protest and political voice. So I kind of talked about all this, but we also see the Fugitive Slave Act, which we will definitely revisit later. And basically it said that the federal government said that if a slave... All right, sorry guys, got cut off there. Okay, so just kind of talking about abolition in America. I kind of jumped ahead in the slides about the Slave Act, and we'll come back to that. So let's kind of back up a little bit. In 1836, we have House of Representatives passing the gag rule, which basically put a kibosh on any discussion about slavery within Congress, because it was just such a controversial issue. And we saw that with the Missouri Compromise. I think we saw that. I know that we kind of hinted at that with the nullification crisis, that Southerners are starting to, question, to what extent are people willing to kind of interfere with their way of life. And so we're going to see that continue to be a significant issue. And we also see political parties that are growing, such as the Liberated Party, that are coming together over this institution of slavery. And here we have this dapper gentleman, Frederick Douglass, who just lived an amazing life, escaped slavery, just an amazing writer, and just gives us really interesting perspectives into the life as a slave, the life of a free man, the life of a free black man. And he's really influential in politics, and we're going to see him moving up to the Civil War, that he is just a powerhouse in this abolition movement to the benefit of enslaved persons. So I'm going to turn to Dr. Maspera, who's going to bring us home.
All right, so the end of the chapter wraps up talking about women's rights in antebellum America and women's suffrage. So that's what I'm going to talk about here for the next couple of minutes. One of the things that happens as a result of the Second Great Awakening is you get to see a lot of social and political movement in getting women the right to vote. Now, we got to lay down the foundation before we talk about suffrage. 19th century American women had very little rights, and pretty much once a woman entered into a marriage, she had no political rights. 19th century women couldn't vote. All property went to the husband when they were married, and they were pretty much, to a large degree, second-class citizens in America and second-class citizens under the law. This was all sort of driven by this concept of the cult of domesticity, where this idea that the woman's role and in the social structure of America in the 19th century was to be at home, to be the caregiver, the child rearer, and to basically be the moral fiber of America holding the nation together. It was not to be the political voice. It was not to be the economic voice. And so as a result of that, women start to increasingly fight harder for the same rights that a man has in 19th century America. We mentioned earlier, women play a huge role in this religious revival movement of the Second Great Awakening. Women play a huge role in the temperance movement. And women also are one of the leading voices in the fight to abolish slavery in the United States. And kind of the seminal moment of the antebellum period in terms of women's rights is the Seneca Falls Convention. In 1848, feminists meet in New York at a convention known as the Women's Rights Convention. Now, at this convention, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and others draft a Declaration of Sentiments. And in the Declaration of Sentiments, it's a very similar document to the Declaration of Independence, except it does not limit the rights granted or the declaration to just men. It also includes women. A quote from it are, "All men and women are created equal." And this is a document that we hope to kind of revisit in class and dig a little bit deeper into it and compare it to the Declaration of Independence. And a resolution is passed at the Seneca Falls Convention demanding suffrage for women. And there is a lot of momentum, a lot of progress moving towards women getting the right to vote nationwide. Even before the Civil War, in some Western states, women were granted the right to vote in local elections and state elections. But under the U.S. Constitution, suffrage was still only granted to white men. And so you begin to see this push in the 1840s and as the decades move on with women getting the right to vote. And that all is pretty much crushed by the Civil War, in that a lot of the movement that women had made in terms of suffrage and the right to vote, really just when the Civil War hits, it all comes to a crashing halt. And then during the Reconstruction period, which we will obviously cover, it's never really, the same momentum really isn't recaptured until much later in the Progressive era and moving into World War I, which is in the 20th century, in the 1900s. So women's suffrage, to a large degree, is pretty much tabled because of all the attention that the Civil War grasps. So Again, that is the antebellum age of reform period for United States history, chapter 10. We hope that you guys are enjoying our little lecture podcast. We hope that you guys are enjoying American Yop. I know that us two nerds, we sure do enjoy it.